Let's go to Canberra now, where our political correspondent Andrew Green is joined by Liberal MP Josh Frydenberg and Labor Senator David Feeney.
Josh Frydenberg in Melbourne and Labor Senator David Feeney here in Canberra. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, a pleasure.
Good afternoon.
First to you, Senator Feeney. You are also the Parliamentary Secretary for Defence, and we are seeing a developing story with Libya. Will Australia, do you anticipate, have any physical support in this operation?
No, that's not envisaged at this time. At the moment we're talking about forces from the US, the UK, Canada, France, and perhaps some component elements from the Arab League. So at this stage it is not proposed that Australian forces or assets will be involved. But of course Australia has put its full diplomatic support behind this effort, has been banging on about this for quite some little while, and I think we're all very, very pleased that the Security Council has made the decision it's made. It's
been Kevin Rudd who's been leading that diplomatic push. Has he shown the qualities of a good leader in this episode? Yeah,
I think Kevin Rudd's got a great deal to be proud of here. He has, together with the Prime Minister and the Defence Minister Stephen Smith, assertively put the case that a no-fly zone is one of the options that the Security Council should consider, and has spoken at length with European and Arab foreign ministers and others about this proposal. And yeah, I think he can take a great deal of pride, as indeed I think the whole government can, about the fact that this very important decision has been made and enjoys our full support.
He was very much ahead of Julia Gillard on this. He was advocating a no-fly zone a lot earlier. Given also the recent news poll numbers, perhaps a future leader in the making.
Well, I think when you extract the mischievous media from this question, there's not really a tale to be told here. Julia Gillard as leader of the government, Stephen Smith as Defence Minister and Kevin Rudd as Foreign Minister have all put this case very strongly. A no-fly zone was always one of the options that Australia was keen for the Security Council to consider. Kevin as Foreign Minister has, of course, done the hard yards in terms of getting around and talking to people. Julia Gillard obviously discussed this matter with her US counterparts very recently, and of course I know Stephen Smith in Defence has been doing the same. So I would say it's a team effort, but of course having said that, I think you're quite right to identify Kevin Rudd as someone who can take a great deal of pleasure and pride.
We'll bring in the opposition and Josh Frydenberg. Do you believe Australia's role in this, even though it is a very minor one, are you happy with the way the Gillard government has handled it?
Look, I think they've made a hash of it, to be really honest, and I must say it's quite ironic to have David Feeney there singing Kevin Rudd's praises. I mean, he was part of the group that took the knife to Kevin and ended his prime ministership. The truth of the matter is Kevin Rudd was out there for weeks saying that we should have a no-fly zone, but Julia Gillard was saying, oh, it's just one of the options, and this created so much confusion that the US Embassy had to come in Australia to Canberra and seek a clarification of Australia's position. So Julia Gillard, who has said very publicly she has no interest whatsoever in foreign policy, even while she was over in the US, did not play a leadership role on this issue. Kevin Rudd was out there putting the case for a no-fly zone, and that's what we have, and the coalition now welcomes the UN Security Council's decision, might I say a unanimous decision of 10 votes with 5 abstentions in favour of a no-fly zone, and that's a good thing because Colonel Gaddafi is out of control and he is committing indiscriminate attacks against civilians in Libya.
Is that a fair summation, Senator Feeney? Julia Gillard did get a very good reception in Washington, it has to be put.
Sure, she did. And listen, I think the Liberal Party are desperately trying to build up differences here that frankly don't exist. The fact that Julia Gillard said a no-fly zone was one of several options, and Kevin Rudd made it plain that that was the option he preferred. These are mere semantics. The point is, I think Australian foreign policy and Australian diplomacy has been on show here. We've put our case to the world. We've done so energetically, and we're obviously very, very pleased today that, as Josh says, we are now in a position to look at a no-flight zone that will prevent Gaddafi and his various military and mercenary forces from continuing to butcher his own population.
Josh,
Andrew, I must say, Andrew, if this is Australian foreign policy on show, it's a pretty bad show because, you know, even during the week you had Kevin Rudd making a mockery of Julia Gillard's earlier proclamation that she could only be Prime Minister, or she had a chance of becoming Prime Minister as much as she had of being the full forward for the Western Bulldogs. He went out publicly and said he's got as much chance of being Prime Minister as being captain of the Broncos. Well, clearly he does have ambitions. Clearly Julia Gillard and Kevin Rudd are not on talking terms, and he harbours a big grudge for what happened to him as Prime Minister.
I think Kevin Rudd's grumpiness has only been on display, Josh, because he's asked again and again and again these questions that frankly have no bearing on his work or on his professionalism or on his commitment to his job. And the only grumpiness we've seen from Kevin Rudd is when he's asked again and again and again about questions that frankly have nothing to do with his work and nothing to do with his achievements. And I think every Australian, and I know you've had a lot of views in the foreign affairs space, and I'm sure you share my enthusiasm for this decision today, and I think we should also share some pride in the fact that Australia has been out there in front leading this debate internationally, and of course we can be proud about that because we know it was the right thing to do.
We might stick with the theme of divisions, and Josh, the opposition leader, your leader Tony Abbott, has had a bit of a varying position with the science of climate change. Earlier on Monday he was saying that it wasn't quite settled, the science. Do you think that this may have damaged Tony Abbott's overall attack on Labor's carbon tax?
Not at all. He's made clear, and it's my position as well, that there is climate change and humans contribute to climate change and we need to do something about it.
It has taken him a while.
But we're not going to punish the Australian householders and Australian families with a carbon tax that's not thought through, that hasn't been properly consulted, that consisted of a broken promise by Julia Gillard, and that will push electricity prices for the average household by at least $300 per year, and increase the price of petrol by more than 6.5 cents a litre. And what we had this week was Ross Garnaut, the hand-picked head or advisor to Julia Gillard on climate change, belling the cat because he came out and said, you know, you've got to at least have a $26 a tonne price on carbon. Now, this is actually what the Treasury had earlier modelled, and Greg Combet was trying to distance himself off from for weeks. And now here's Ross Garnaut confirming that, and that is going to lead to a dramatic increase in electricity prices and petrol prices for Australian families. Might I say at a time when the United States hasn't put a price on carbon, when Australia has a number of heavily energy-intensive export industries, and this is not good policy, and Julia Gillard has broken a promise.
Briefly to you, Senator Feeney.
Well, one of the great ironies of this debate, of course, is that while Labor is pursuing a market solution, the Liberal Party and Josh Frydenberg here tonight is advocating, in fact, a command economy model. Their target for cutting emissions and our target for cutting emissions is actually the same. And they say they believe in carbon
we have a better
emissions.
way. We have a better way.
Of course, the better way that Josh is talking about is a command economy model. That he's proposing to spend taxpayers' monies in the billions of dollars to pick winners who will abate carbon emissions. They're not able to tell us how they're going to do that. They're not able to tell us how effective that'll be. But one thing we know for certain, and that is that tens of billions of dollars are going to have to come from somewhere to fund their crazy ideas, and that will come from the taxpayer in some form or another. So I wonder whether, in fact, their policy is going to end up costing more but achieving less than Labor's policy. And as I say, our commitment to a market mechanism, our commitment to contemporary and understood science means that really only Labor can navigate Australia through this very complex problem.
Josh, do you believe that that Labor will get any traction with its arguments? We are starting to see a different tone in Labor's arguments and Ross Garnaut's intervention. Do you think that there may be a change in the public sentiment on this?
Look, I don't think Labor knows actually what's hit them on this, because Julia Gillard has sort of unilaterally announced a carbon tax, only months after going to the election, saying, quote, no government she leads will introduce a carbon tax. Clearly a breach of faith with the Australian people, and she's going to pay a very high price for that. And then secondly, you've had them distancing themselves from earlier Treasury modelling on the price of a tonne of carbon. And now Ross Garnaut's put that out there. They can't distance themselves, and they're going to have to handle the evidence, which is that it'll increase electricity prices for every Australian household by at least $300 per year, and petrol prices by more than 6.5 cents a litre. This is a time when Australian households are doing it tough. And no matter what amount of compensation this government wants to throw at people, it's not going to make up for the increase in electricity prices, which will flow through, may I say, to every other part of the economy and cost jobs. I mean, in the steel industry.
Josh, where does your $11 billion come from to fund
we've
your
actually budgeted our market-based mechanism, so to speak. And can I just say that you're going to cost jobs. It's going to cost jobs because, for example, in the steel industry, where at least 70,000 Australians are employed, those jobs could go offshore, and that's going to be very damaging for the Labor brand and for the Australian economy.
Well, gentlemen, I think we appear to be out of time. Thank you very much for your time, Labor Senator David Feeney, and in Melbourne, Josh Frydenberg.
And thanks, Josh.
Thank you. Thanks, David.